Hey friends, in today's tutorial we'll be making this screen from a SweetGreen app, specifically a screen where you can create your own salad bowl. It's pretty simple, just one screen, but we'll be adding some scrolling behavior to it. So first we'll be able to scroll vertically like this, and then for any toppings that you have already selected, we'll add the horizontal scroll like this. To get started, there are a couple things that I already have in my file. And I'll link this blank worksheet in the description so that you can use it if you follow along. But essentially, from the screenshot of the app, I did color pick some colors and I gave them like this very weird names, which I actually asked ChatGPT to name them. And then I also got the pictures for the toppings. Lastly, we just have two icons here. One is like the pencil icon, the edit icon, and another one is X, like the close icon. So I'm going to get started by adding my colors to variables. And it doesn't really matter, you can use styles or variables. And there's probably already a plugin out there that will allow you to quickly create all your variables, but I don't have that many colors, so I think it's okay just to do them manually. So what I just did, I created a color variable and then I got the color using the picker tool. We'll rename this one to Crisp Ivory. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the rest of the colors. Okay, so now I have all my colors saved as variables. And the next thing I'm going to do is add a couple of textiles. So I think we'll just have 3. So in the app and on the website, I think their typeface is called Sweet Sans. And I don't have that. As a replacement, I'm just going to use one of the Google fonts. I'm going to use Montserrat. It definitely does not look the same, but I think for tutorial, it's good enough. So the first one, I'm going to do text small. And this one, I'm going to update the font family to Montserrat. I'll update it to medium. And then we're going to save it as text small. And then our next one is going to be 16. Just do like text default. And then our last one is going to be text large. We'll make it 20. And just save as text large. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and turn these images into components. And this will be useful for instance swapping later on. So I'm going to go to this icon here and create multiple components. You could maybe do a set and then just have everything as a variant. As I was running a test for this tutorial, this approach ended up working for me. And because it is inside a section, when you go to your assets and look for components, they are grouped nicely under this toppings header, so they don't really get mixed up with other components. Then I'm also going to turn these two icons into separate components as well. I'm also going to bring them out of this section. And so now when I go to the assets, I have my topping section, and then I have my icons. You can also put this into their own section instead of it just being a frame. The next thing, we're going to make our first component, which is going to be this card here. So I'm going to begin by creating a text layer, and I'm going to say topping name, and it's going to be small. We'll give it this dark midnight greens color, and we'll wrap it inside auto layout. Then we'll add a fill of this like creamy almond, and we're going to add an 8-pixel border radius. And then the next thing, we're going to add a placeholder for our topping. And actually what I'm going to do is I'll return to this topping section, and I'm going to make a placeholder component. Let's give it like 8 pixels. It doesn't really matter that it doesn't fit our text styles. And then we'll give it a fixed width and height to match the actual toppings. So it will be 80 by 80. We'll call it placeholder and save it as a component. And the reason I'm doing this is because ideally I don't want to have any like real data inside my main component. I just like to keep it separate. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to search for my placeholder and I'll drop it inside my frame. I'll actually give this a fill of white, and we're going to change the direction. We'll update the spacing in between to 8. Then horizontal padding is going to be 8. and the vertical padding will be 2. Now I can just turn it into a component and we'll call it the card. There are a couple more things that we need to add to this component. So first we do have a selected state when the background is green. And you have this minus icon on the left, and then you have the counter on the right. Another thing that we have, which you can see on some of these toppings here, is an allergen. So we're just going to add that. I'm going to copy, bring it to the bottom. Here we can just write allergen, and I just updated the color to this fiery beetroot. From here, I'm going to add a new variant. For this variant, it's going to be selected. So first I'm going to change the background color to Mint Whisper. Another thing is that we would need to add the minus icon and the counter. For the minus icon, I'm going to make a line. It will be 16 pixels wide. We can give it this midnight greens color. I'll wrap it inside auto layout, give it fixed width and height of 24. And we don't need any padding. We'll also center it. And the background is just going to be crisp ivory. We'll round the corners and we'll change it to remove. I'm also going to make a copy. And this one is going to be counter. And here we'll just add text. That's going to be 1. We can remove the minus and we'll center it. I will need to update the color to Earthy Emerald. And then the color of the one itself is going to be Crispy Ivory. So now we're going to combine these two together in Auto Layout. And I'm going to take this frame and place it inside our card. I'll also add Auto Layout to the overall component set. For this button Auto Layout frame, we'll set it to fill the container and we'll change it to Auto. And now what I'm going to do is rename my property to Selected. This one will be No, and this one will be Yes. We can also select our allergen text layer, and we're going to change it to allergen, and we'll set it to false. Another thing that we can do is to add a text content property. So we're going to select the topping name. We'll just call it name. So now if I were to update this to something else, it updates immediately. I guess we can do the same thing with the allergen. So first I'm going to maybe update this one from allergen to show allergen. And then we'll select and add a text content property. Just call it allergen. And we'll also set it to fill the container. We'll do the same thing with the topping name. The reason for that is that right now, if I kept on typing, our card keeps on growing and we don't want it. We want it to start wrapping. So we'll set it to fill the container. We'll change the text alignment to center. And we can also at some point update the widths of the cards if we wanted to have a fixed width so that it doesn't get too narrow. Okay, for now, we're going to take a break from the card component. And I'm going to go to the frame tool. We'll create a new frame. And it's going to be an iPhone 14 frame. I'm going to begin by creating this header component at the top. So first, I'm going to create a text layer and it will say create your own. We'll want to update the text alignment to the left. And I'll change it to large. Then I'm going to grab our pencil icon here. And so one thing that we can do is that we can make a separate icon button component. I'm going to take this instance and I'll wrap it inside Auto Layout frame. I think we can keep it 40 by 40 to start. So I'll set it to fix width and height. I'll rename it to icon button, turn it into a component, and we'll take this instance. Also for this text layer, I will update it to midnight greens. And now we're going to add Auto Layout. And we'll just want to set it to auto. And let's give it a fixed width of 390. First, I'm going to create another text layer and combine these two together, change the direction. And this one is going to be small. And it's going to be our info. I don't know, let's give it like $12. And then I'll like 240 calories. And another thing that we'll need to add here is the close icon. So actually, I'm going to create an instance of our icon button. And one thing we can add to the main component is an instance swap. We only have one icon, but that's okay. So for this instance, we'll change it to close. And we'll bring it somewhere here. First, what I'm going to do is that I'll give this a fill of crisp ivory, and we'll give it a 16 pixel horizontal padding. And then for vertical, it could be 48 on the top and 8 on the bottom. Now I'm going to place the X icon inside, but we're going to change it to absolute position, and I'll just bring it somewhere to the top right here. Maybe in the corner. Then for this frame overall, we can add the border radius up on the top. And later on, we're going to also add shadow up on the top as well. The next thing that we're going to add is this row of selected toppings. I'm going to go ahead and grab an instance of this card. Actually, let's hide this allergen thing by default. And now the first thing, in order for me to change the picture, I have to click into this placeholder layer, and then I can go ahead and change it. But we can also simplify it just like we did with the icon button. I'm going to return to my component, and I'm going to add an instance swap. We can call it tapping. Then we'll select placeholder. And now we need to bind this placeholder instance to the actual instance swap. And so now when I return to my instance, I have this option here. And by default, it shows me all the toppings. Now I can start adding different pictures and updating the names. I'm going to do a couple of those. And so for the cheese here, we can add show the allergen. We'll just do like contains dairy. These cards definitely feel too narrow to me. One thing that we can do for the main component is we'll give it a fixed width of like 110. Now all these instances here, we'll wrap them inside auto layout. And we'll set the spacing in between to 16 or maybe 12. We'll also want them all to be the same height, so we'll set it to fill the container. One thing, I want all of them to be aligned to the top, so I'm going to adjust that inside my main component. But now you can see that all of our counters are also not aligned, so ideally we also want all of them to be at the bottom here. And there are a couple of things that we can do. The first one is that we can combine all of the top layers inside their own auto layout and then set space in between to auto so that all this stuff is always at the top and the counter is always at the bottom. Or something else that we can do is set the counter to absolute position. We could update the height to be fixed here as well, so maybe like 156. Now, if I take an instance and I change the height, we want the counter to always remain at the bottom, but that doesn't happen. So what we can do is set the constraints from top to bottom. So now as I change the height, I can see that my counter always stays at the bottom. Now we're going to adjust the height a little bit so that we always see the allergen. And we're going to place it inside our frame. We'll add 16 horizontal padding, and then maybe 16 at the top, 24 at the bottom. And we're also going to set the fill to crisp ivory. And the last thing, we're going to set it to fixed width. And our fixed width is going to be 390. We'll combine these two layers inside their own auto layout frame. Actually, what we can do, since these two layers will always be together, we're going to remove the fill from each individually and apply it to the overall frame. And then we'll just make sure to add our top border radius And last thing, we're going to add a bottom stroke and give it this pebble mist color. And we'll also give it a shadow. So we'll change it to be on the top of the card. We'll increase the blur, but then make it lighter. The next thing that we can do is all of our topping sections here. What I'm going to do is create a text layer. I'll change it to text large. And I think our first one is bases. We'll also update it to dark green color. And then we're going to grab our card. Let's move this icon button inside our components. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each section, the bases, toppings, and premiums. This one is going to be chapter me. Then we'll make coffee. This one is arugula. Now that I have all of my bases here, I'm going to select and apply auto layout. By default, it did set it to wrap, which is what I wanted. And we'll update the space between the columns to 12 and the space between rows to 12. Let's rename this frame to toppings. And we'll combine it with the label. And we can also keep the space in between at 16. And I'll just call this frame section. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this topping section and then the premium section. Okay, so I have all of my sections here. I have the bases, the toppings, and the premiums. And then for some of these premiums, we're going to update it. The show contains theory. For this row here, we can also increase the height slightly. And the last thing I'm going to do is, so it matches for the things that I have selected in the current toppings, I'm also going to mark them as selected inside the entire topping list. So we'll mark this one, broccoli, tomatoes. I honestly don't remember what else I had. For this row, we're also going to make it taller. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to select all the 3 sections and we'll set the space in between to maybe 48 pixels. And now I'm going to place it inside the frame and we'll set the height to fixed. And then let's do vertical spacing around 24 and horizontal 16. We'll also give it a fill of crisp ivory. Just for a moment, I can unclip the content and I can see that I still have all of my current toppings. They're just overflowing horizontally. And then I have the full list of toppings and it's just overflowing vertically. So what we can do is go inside the prototyping mode and see what we have. And now nothing is scrolling because I didn't have any overflow settings set. Let's change the overflow to vertical. Now everything is scrolling. One thing is we want this part to stay fixed in place. So instead of scroll with parent, we're going to set it to fixed. So now what happens is that this part stays as expected, but then as we scroll, we see that all of our toppings are shown here up on the top. What we can do is here, I have this card here in the background, and then it also looks like I have this black overall background. But what it actually is, it's just a rectangle. So I'm going to make a rectangle and we'll make it pure black. We'll put it inside our frame, align it to the left and to the top, and it should be 390. And so what we want to make sure is that it's also fixed so that it doesn't scroll. And another thing that we can do is to add fake cards in the background. So we'll just give it also 8 pixels and give it a background of crisp ivory. So I just placed it inside the frame, but we want to make sure it's somewhere on the top and behind the actual card. Maybe it should be a little wider and we'll bring it closer. Let's rename this first rectangle to background, and this one is going to be background card. This one will be header, and all of these are set to fixed. Let's also add a preview device here. When we return and we scroll, we can see that we no longer see our toppings popping up at the top, but we still can scroll our current items. So to do that, what we're going to do is go to prototype and do horizontal scroll. Now we can scroll it left to right. Something to note, there is this weird behavior that I've been getting where you can see technically we did set the 16 pixel padding on the right, but it doesn't allow me to scroll all the way to see that, or it just doesn't show. No matter how big padding I set here on the right, let's do like 96, it just doesn't work. What I've been doing instead is that I added an extra auto layout frame for the cards. So I have an inner auto layout frame and an outer. I hate nesting auto layout frames, but I guess to make this work, we can do that. Then on this inner auto layout frame, I just set a 16 pixel right padding. So now when we return, you can actually see that I do now have some space here on the right. Okay, so we're almost done. There's one thing that we have left to do, and it's these buttons at the bottom of the screen. What I'm going to do is first we'll make a very simple button component. So it will be button. We'll set it to text default. And actually, we'll give it fixed height of 48. And then maybe a 16 horizontal padding, even though it's not going to really matter. Then let's do our primary or solid one first. We'll give it the background of this emerald color and then change the text to crisp ivory. So this will be button. And we'll also round it. Let's turn this into a component. And we'll add one more variant. This one is going to be the outline one. So we'll just change the text and the background fill. We'll also rename the property type. This one will be solid. And this one will be outline. So now I'm going to grab an instance. And our first button is going to be I'm done. The second one is going to be cancel. Then we're going to combine the two buttons together in auto layout. And we're going to I'm going to briefly lock this layer so it doesn't get in the way. We'll set the width for the button auto layout to fixed. And we're just going to center it. And we want the two buttons to fill the container. And we'll give it 12 vertical padding, 16 horizontal. One thing that's missing here is this home indicator. So we're going to add that as well. We'll just make a very tiny rectangle. We'll round the corners, give it a height of 5. And I think the width is like 132. We'll wrap it inside its own auto layout frame. Give it a fixed height of 32. Align it to the bottom. Could just be pure black. Now we're going to rename this to home indicator, and let's bring it inside this frame. We're going to combine these two together, and then we'll give this overall frame fill of crisp ivory, and we'll align it to the bottom. And then we'll add the top stroke of this emerald color. And also, I just noticed that my topping list here is not 390, so we'll fix that. Now when I go back, you can see that as I scroll, my buttons scroll together with the toppings. To fix that, we're just going to select this footer. You can also call it footer, call this buttons. So we'll select this footer and change it to fixed. Now when I scroll, you can see that my buttons stay in place. Another thing that we can do is add more padding to the bottom of the toppings list, because right now this is the maximum that I can scroll and I don't see this last topping. So what I'm going to do is select the topping list. And for the bottom here, we can do maybe like 148. Now I can see my last topping, and I also have some space here at the bottom. That's pretty much everything. A couple last things that we can do is cleaning up the file. I'll put my button inside the components, and then you can also place this iPhone frame here, and then make sure that all of our layers are in order that makes sense. Aside from that, I think that's it for this tutorial. Something that I wanted to say is that sometimes I think for any designer, it is useful to copy other apps, other people's work, just to try something new. I think it's almost like a meditative exercise. And so one thing that I think is good to do is, let's say you're like using an app or find something that you really like, is just taking a screenshot of that app and maybe later on doing this exercise to where you just try to copy it. Anyway, yeah, that's it for this tutorial. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'll link the 2 files to the description of this video. The first one is going to be a blank worksheet that just has all the images, the icons, and the second file is just going to be the complete version of this tutorial. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.